to our regular show, Sorashori, which is live in CBN 24. It's a very pleasure moment for us that today we have a special person in our show. As you all know that CBN 24 is going to show you some profile of persons who are, devoting themselves in Canadian culture as well as in Bangladeshi culture, in Bangladeshi community, and in a broader sense in Canadian culture. So we have a very special person today. His name is Parthi Kandavel. He is running for TDSB School Trustee in Scarborough, Southwest in Canada. So, and as well as he's a teacher. Parthi Kandavel, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. That's my
Thank you. It's a great moment for us to have you in our show. So I think before knowing about you, we have to know something about TDSB, which is Toronto District School Board, because you are one of the trustees of that school board. So what is TDSB?
The TDSB, as you said, is the Toronto District School Board. It's the biggest school board in all of Canada, and it's the biggest, third biggest after New York City and Chicago. So it has 580 schools, 240,000 students, $3 billion budget, and our focus is to focus on student achievement, equity, and well-being. So all our children come to our public education, which is free, receive a good education, and prepares them for the future.
And one thing I want to inform our audience that the area of Scarborough Southwest, which is the mostly Bangladeshi community are living in your area.
Right.
So it's Ward 18.
Ward 18,
yeah. So the next question is, you are the trustee of TDSB. So why you have decided to be a trustee of this school board?
It's a good question. My grandparents were teachers, my parents were teachers, and I became a teacher. And when you look at new Canadians, whether it's Bangladeshi or from Ukraine or wherever in the world people come to Canada, parents' number one concern is their child's education. Is it a good education? Is it accessible? Can they go to a good school? How is the quality of teaching? And in Canada and Toronto especially, 95% of children go to public education, which is free education.
Yeah.
So how do we make that a top quality education? In my opinion, is the number one service that the government provides to its citizens is a quality education. Because if you can come to this country with no money but have a good education, go to a good college or a good university and have a good life, that's a good country. So that is the reason why I wanted to become a trustee, is to help serve society. And there's different ways to serve society, but for me personally, to have a role in public education, to give leadership, to let all the communities feel they have a voice and to make their school better, to make their neighborhood better. That is the role of the trustee, and that is why I wanted to become one, is to do my public service in directly connected to public education.
What kind of activities we have to do as a trustee?
That's a good question. So the trustee's responsibilities are three mainly. First, it's the governance, to make sure that the system is being governed, being run properly. So we have a director of education who has about 35 to 40 superintendents. So the city is divided into about 30 areas, and each area has a superintendent responsible for about 20 schools. So the superintendent works with the principals to ensure that good learning is happening in all the schools.
Right.
The trustee's job is to make sure that system is being run properly. That's one. Second responsibility is policy. If there is a policy to create a certain school to focus on technology, like SATEC, many Bengali children go to SATEC because it's a strong maths and science and computer school, then that's a policy we will create. So policy, as you know, sets the direction for the system. So that's one area that the trustees do, is they create the policy for the school system. And third area is parent advocacy. If a parent has a problem with the school, whether it could be with the principal or the teacher. The trustee comes in as a mediator, as an opportunity to help solve the problem. If a school community has an issue, and that's one thing, to give you an example, in this area of pharmacy in Danforth, the Oak Ridge community, Oak Ridge Junior Public School and Samuel Hearn, a lot of children here, 1,200 kids, 500 at Samuel Hearn, 700 at Oak Ridge. So we didn't have a proper playing area, proper playing equipment for children. So one of the things last year and this year I worked hard is to make sure the TDSB built the new turf, the new green artificial turf between the new schools. So that's another area trustees advocates and brings what is needed for the schools, because sometimes in any government, whether it's a national government or the city government, you have to a good representative is able to bring what is needed for the community. In this case, we needed a good playing field for the children.
Exactly. That's great. My another question is, what kind of challenges you have faced to run school trustee?
So it's an elected position, so you have to be chosen by the people. So you have to be involved in politics, and as we all know, politics is not always easy. There's a lot of obstacles and challenges, and that's part of politics, so it's not a surprise. You have to work very hard. Every 4 years is the election, and you have to go house to house and talk to people, explain who you are, what you want to do, and people will judge you.
And your mission, your vision.
Exactly, right? So that's the straightforward piece. And then you have obstacles. People will play some games, but that's normal and that's part of the game. But I enjoy the role, and the biggest obstacle maybe is time, right? There's 30 schools in this area, so 30 different communities, 30 different neighborhoods. So this role, it's considered a part-time role. I don't have any staff like a member of parliament.
Exactly, you have to do yourself
everything myself. So it's a position that's directly connected to the neighborhood. So I know all the parents, and I know, but the biggest challenge is time, because there's only so many hours.
How do you overcome that one?
It's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice, and sometimes you have to say no because the time is challenging. But you try to fit it in the day. So sometimes my day will go for 10 hours or 12 hours usually. So I enjoy the work, but that's probably the challenge.
Do you have conversation with the Bangladeshi community here about their kids, their school system?
Yeah. So when we're working on the artificial turf, that's obviously not a Bengali issue, but I met with a lot of the Bengali parents. And our principal, Mr. Sohail Sheikh here at Samuel Hearn Public School, is a very good principal, and the community likes him a lot. Recently, I've been looking to get more involved with the Bengali community. So last year, for International Mother Language Day, we had our first TDSB celebration of International Mother Language Day on February 21st. So that was a big celebration, and it was very important for Bengali children and the community to realize the tremendous contribution Bangladesh has given the world by championing IMLD, International Mother Language Day, at the United Nations. So all the countries, all the cultures, all the languages, we have over 150 languages in the Toronto District School Board. Now, more of them are celebrating their mother tongue because of the contribution the Bengali community has made. So, but one thing in particular that I want to share, recently we had in the Bangla community, there was some mental health is a growing issue, not just in the Bangla community, in my own community, in a lot of other communities.
The other communities as well.
That mental health is an important
element to work for.
We need to improve the communication between the parents and the younger generation. How do we bridge that so nobody feels isolated, nobody feels lonely? So that's something, and I'll definitely keep you informed, is to have an open forum for Bangla parents to talk about these issues, because when the children become teenagers, it becomes very more difficult at home.
Yeah, recently we had a great loss of families.
Exactly, that's what I was referring to, that was very sad. And also in other communities, we had one last week as well, 22-year-old boy. And it's a growing issue, and that we need to address, because in our community, it's very similar community.
Right.
People don't talk about their feelings, their emotions, what's troubling them. So
yeah, sometimes they get some cultural shock here as well, because if somebody come from their native here, and after that they will have a different culture in their schooling system or the other, the social system. So sometimes the kids, they get kind of cultural shock. So that's kind of problem, and have to address that one too.
Exactly.
So let's talk about multiculturalism, which is related with this one. As you see that Canada embraced multiculturalism. So what is your thoughts about multiculturalism here?
Multicultural, it's a unique idea that Canada was one of the first countries to embrace it and promote it, with our not first prime minister, but the father of our current prime minister, Pierre Trudeau. He passed it in the early 70s. At that time, across the world, it was a very unique thing. I think Canada as a whole has benefited from it. We are open as a society, whether you are here for 100 years or for 10 years or 1 year, you embrace the idea that all cultures are equal. We have to respect one another. We have to be friends with one another and become part of this Canadian society. So we've done a very good job in embracing cultures. The next step in multiculturalism is how do we find common values in all of our countries. We may look different, pray different, speak different, but we have common values. An honest person, it doesn't matter if they're black or white or brown or yellow. The morality is more, exactly. And that's why I think the next step of multiculturalism. How do we celebrate the differences and diversity, but how do we find the common, the unity amongst all the different cultures and religions? So that's the next step for our country, is how do we find the unity in multicultures?
I got a thing, which is there was an argument I saw in newspapers some days before, that the mandatory music classes in school, as you know, and some parents in Muslim community, they are opposed to that. So what do you think about that one?
It's a good question, and I'm happy you answered it, because it's a very serious question.
Because somebody had that intention, they ask this kind of question.
It's a very good question, and it's a serious question. My response is that in our system we have what's called religious accommodation, right? And not just for its music classes. If it's a health class, if the parent wants to remove the child, they have the right to do that, right? But it's a conversation with the principal. Principal will show this is the reason why we're doing it, right? So when it comes to music, my advice is the music and the science and the research shows that music helps develop the brain, as we all know from the day the child is born to 16, 18, the brain is constantly evolving, learning, growing. And music, and the research shows, helps develop it. So we need to explain to parents the reason why music, whether it's a guitar or a piano or a tabla or whatever it is, it helps grow the child's brain and develop it. So, but if parents, have an understanding that's different, we accept it. We can't force it, but we have to try to educate as much as possible.
I got another question, which is practicing religion in school. So what do you think about that one?
Yeah, so it's a similar one, and we saw a big debate in the Mississauga Peel District School. And
for the Muslim community, they get the opportunity to pray on Friday.
On Friday, and that's something we do in our own schools, in Toronto District School. We've been doing it for a long time in Valley Park, because in that school, 99% of the students Muslim faith. What was happening before is that for Jummah on Friday, the students will walk and they'll cross a major road to go for prayers. But then we thought, the request from the community is let the imam come, one person, instead of 300 students join. So that's what's happening, and it's continue to happen in here. So it's very unfortunate what's happening in Peel District, because you have a group that's very hateful, very racist, trying to bring Islamophobia into our school system, and that has no place, and that's, I'm very happy. As a Toronto District School Board, we stood up against it and said we support Peel District, and the Premier, the Minister of Education, the Ontario Public School Boards Association as a whole came to support Peel District. So that type of hate mongering,
Even the current government.
even the current, exactly, the Premier of Ontario,
Yeah.
Kathleen Wynne, came out to support it. So I'm very happy that the media and the bigger public didn't respond and catch up to this hate-filled protest that was happening. Yeah, it was very unfortunate.
This is, really. So, most of the questions I asked you, but in the last but not the least, how do you evaluate TDSB activities here?
How do I
Evaluate.
It's it's a good question. I think the number one test or evaluation is: are our children happy? Are they happy going to school? Are they learning? I think those are the first steps to evaluate whether, as a public school system, are we doing our job? Are the children happy? Are they learning? Right? Are they being supported? And then you look at the other aspects. Are we giving the opportunities? If they want to learn a certain skill, a certain trade in high school, how do we make those opportunities available and make sure they're equitable across our whole system? As you know, our city is a very rich city, but it has also a lot of challenges as well. And we want to make sure that just because you live in a rich neighborhood, you don't have better choices. We want to have all those choices equal. And that's the promise and the purpose of public education, that all members of the public have access to good education. So that's the test. Do we treat the child who lives in Rosedale, which is a multi-million-dollar neighborhood, or the child in Rexdale or Jane and Finch, and wherever, right? They live, whether they come from new to the country or been here 100 years, do we treat all children equally and give the same opportunity? So that's how I evaluate whether my job and the system's job is, are we doing our job? Are we being fair to everyone?
That's right. So the last question is about you. Like, how do you feel here in Canada?
It's in my opinion, and I know a lot of people say it's the best country in the world. I come from a community that had to leave our country because of war, and many of my relatives are across the world. We have relatives in Australia, in Norway, in England. We used to live in England before we came to Canada, the US, France, and the benefit of having relatives across the world, the disadvantage, we don't see them often, but the benefit is you learn the different types of countries, and they come to Canada and visit. And now, after being outside of our country for a long time, 25, 30 years, a lot of our relatives, they all say, though they live in different countries, they say Canada is the best country. So it's one thing when we say it as Canadians, but when other people say, from their observation, Canada is the best country, then that's that's how I feel. That we are very privileged and lucky with God's grace that we live in a country that's so fair and so gives opportunity for everyone.
So do you have any last message to deliver for our Bangladeshi community?
First of all, thank you very much for everyone watching. The Bangla community has been very supportive of me in my last election and through all the work that I've been doing these last 2.5 years, and I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to engaging with the Bangla community to make our school system the best school system, that it's responsible and responsive to the community, especially the Bangla community, in terms of in the secondary level, when that's the age when the students look at opportunities for career. And I'm looking to host an event to invite all Bangla parents in our school system to come back and share their experiences and their ideas about our school system.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining with us today. Thank you. So the audience, he is Parthi Kandavel. He was talking about the education system, school board, trustee, TDSB, and the other things like multiculturalism in Canada. So everything. I think you are enjoying our show. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a nice day for you. So this is everything for us today. We'll have another person in our next show. Let's see.